God, the humidity in Dallas is actually insane right now. I feel like I'm breathing soup. I spent most of my Tuesday afternoon at an open house, one of those modern farmhouse types. White siding, black window frames, and a kitchen island that was just ridiculously huge. I spent 3 hours explaining the FAVAX system to this couple from Plano, who spent more time arguing about the guest bedroom paint than actually looking at the house. By the time I got home, my heels were killing me, and Heidi pretty much sweated through my blouse. We have a big place, 5 bedrooms, which we bought 10 years ago, after David got his senior partnership. It's a nice house, but the HOA is a total nightmare. They'll literally fine you if your grass is too long, or if you leave your trash cans out past Tuesday night. Everything has to look like a catalog. The house was quiet when I walked in, just the fridge humming. David wasn't home. He was probably still at the firm, or maybe getting drinks with the other partners. I stopped asking for his schedule. After 25 years, if I ask where he is, he usually just sighs and tells me how stressful his day was. Like my day dealing with neurotic homebuyers is just a hobby. I started unloading the dishwasher and found a pasta pot that the machine completely missed, so I had to scrub it by hand. I was just standing there staring out the window at the hedges, wondering when I stopped actually liking them. I used to love gardening. Back when we lived in that tiny apartment in Arlington. I think it was 2002 or 2003, right when he became an associate. I spent all my time, then making sure his shirts were pressed and his lunch was ready. I just thought that was my role, you know? Just being the one who kept things running while he built his career. We don't really talk much these days, but I just figured that's what happens when you're our age. You just get used to the quiet. I know exactly how he likes everything: black coffee, medium rare steak, and a quiet house when he gets home. I guess I just got too good at being useful. David walked in around 7:30. He didn't really look at me. He gave me a quick kiss on the cheek and went straight upstairs to change. I told him dinner was ready, but he barely grunted before heading upstairs, typical. I stood there for a second holding a dish towel. I don't know, I just felt invisible. Like I was just another appliance in the house. I do my job, I'm reliable, and nobody actually notices him there. After dinner, we barely spoke. David said he had to go back to the office for a few hours to finish some briefs, so he left around 9:02. He's been doing that a ton lately. He said it was some high-profile merger, and I just believed him. David's always been the high achiever. I was the one doing the school runs for the kids there, both in college now, when handling the neighborhood association stuff. So I decided to finally tackle the hall closet. It was mostly just junk old umbrellas, some old magazines and holiday decorations we never use. At one point I realized I needed some heavy-duty tape from the laundry room. I opened the utility drawer, and it was a total disaster. I spent a few minutes digging through dead batteries and old pizza coupons from a place that closed years ago. David refuses to throw away batteries because he says he'll test them later, which is a lie he's been telling for 20 years. I was actually getting kind of annoyed with the clutter, but I finally found the tape. I went back to the closet and started moving some heavier boxes. As I pushed aside a crate of winter coats, I felt something in the corner tucked behind some linens. It was a small black leather bag. It wasn't one of his usual work bags, not those big, expensive ones he always carries. This one was smaller and sleeker. It looked like something he'd bought at a boutique. It was hidden way in the back, like it was meant to stay there. I sat down on the carpet. I didn't open it right away, I just looked at it. I didn't feel guilty about snooping. I mean, we share a bed and a bank account, but we haven't shared a real thought in years. I didn't actually know what he kept private anymore. I opened the latch. It wasn't locked. Inside, there wasn't any money or letters. There was a small digital voice recorder, a cheap prepaid phone that looked ancient, and a random notebook with some papers stuffed in it. I looked through the papers first. There were photos of a house, a little cottage with a blue door, and a garden that looked overgrown. It was in a town about 3 hours away from Dallas. I've never even been there. There was also a set of keys and a note on some nice stationery. The handwriting definitely wasn't David's. It was a womansal loopy and kind of rushed. I didn't read the note yet. I checked the phone. There were only 3 contacts: home, office, and just the letter M. I leaned back against the wall and closed my eyes. I could hear the ack humming, keeping the house at a perfect 68 degrees. It was just weirdly clear. I basically been his unpaid assistant for 25 years so he could be the big shot, and the whole time he had a cottage with a blue door. I picked up the voice recorder and pressed play. The voice on the recorder wasn't some big dramatic confession. She just sounded, I don't know, breezy, like the kind of person who's never had to worry about a mortgage or a PTA meeting in her life. She was talking about peonies. Something about the soil at the cottage being better than she thought, and some heirloom seeds she got from a nursery in the valley. And I could hear David laughing. Not the fake laugh he does now, but like a real chuckle. He sounded younger. It was honestly weird. He didn't sound tired or stressed for once. I listened to a few more. In one, they were arguing about what color to paint the trim on some blue door. In another, she was just humming while he told her he'd be there for the weekend. He didn't mention me. Not once. I wasn't even the bad guy in their version. I was just not there. So I just sat on the floor of the hall closet for a while. It smelled like old coats and mothballs. I didn't even cry. I just felt totally numb. Then I heard the garage door open. I didn't move. I just stayed there with the bag open and the recorder in my hand. Then I heard his briefcase hit the table, and then that sigh, the one he always does to let me know he's exhausted, and I should probably just leave him alone. Emma, he called out. Why are the lights off? I got up slowly and walked into the hall. I didn't even bother turning on the light, the glow from the kitchen was enough. I was still holding the leather bag. David stopped walking and looked at my face, then at the bag. For a second, he looked totally panicked. It was the first time in years I'd seen him actually off balance. But then it just vanished. He just looked annoyed. What is that? He asked. I was cleaning the closet, I said. My voice sounded weird to me, like I was listening to someone else talk. I found this, and the phone, and the tapes. David didn't even blink. He didn't try to take the bag or apologize. He just gave this short, sharp laugh and shook his head. He looked at me with this kind of pity that honestly made my skin crawl. Emma, really? You're snooping now? He stepped closer. He used that annoying professional voice he uses with difficult clients at his firm. I told you months ago I was doing some sensitive work in the valley. That house is a corporate retreat. The firm is managing it for a merger. Okay? The woman on the tapes is the property manager. We were just talking about renovations. I just stared at him. The property manager sounds like she's in love with you, David. It sounds like she lives there with you on the weekends. He sighed again. A long one. He stepped into my space, not aggressive, but just crowding me. You're doing this again. This whole anxiety thing. You're just creating drama out of nothing. I think you've been spending too much time alone in this house. Emma, you're imagining things. It's actually kind of worrying. It happened so fast. He didn't even deny the house was there. He just changed what it was. He didn't deny the voice, he just gave her a job. And then he made it about my head, like I was the problem. I felt a bit dizzy. For a second, I actually wondered if I was overreacting. Maybe I was just tired. I'm not imagining the way you laugh on those tapes, I whispered. You're stressed, he said. He tried to sound sweet. Maybe you should take a few days off. Go see your sister. You're not yourself, Emma. You're acting unstable. I get that the job is stressful. But you can't just take it out on me. He didn't even wait for me to answer. He just walked past me, patted my shoulder like I was some kind of scared dog, and went upstairs. I stood there for a minute in the dark, holding the bag. I knew he was lying. I could just feel it, but he'd spent 25 years being the stable one, the successful one. I was the one who handled the schedules and the grass and the menus. Everyone thought he was the authority. I guess I did too. I didn't sleep. I just lay there listening to him breathe next to me. The next morning I woke up first. I made his coffee black, strong in that heavy mug. He likes, and watched him eat toast in silence. He acted like the night before never happened. Or like it was just a little argument that he'd already fixed with his logic. He kissed my cheek and left for the office at 8:15. Wait, was it 8:15? No, he usually leaves at 8:30. He must have been in a rush. So as soon as he was gone, I went to the home office. I didn't even grab the bag first. I went straight for the computer. Now, I've always handled the bills, but David did the big money investments, the 401k, the kids' trusts. We had a joint account for the house, but he had separate ones as I rarely checked. He always said it was for taxes or diversification or whatever. I just trusted him. He had the degree, he was the partner. Why wouldn't I? I logged into our shared portal and started looking at the monthly transfers. I saw a recurring payment, $3,000 a month, going to an account I didn't recognize. It was labeled consulting fees, but it was at some small credit union in a town 3 hours away, the same town as the Blue Door. I spent the next 4 hours just digging. I felt like I was in some cheap TV movie, but the adrenaline was the only thing keeping me awake. Then I found a mortgage application from 2 years ago. He hadn't used joint funds for the down payment. He'd taken a huge chunk out of a secondary investment account I thought was for our retirement. I was looking for property records in the county database when I realized I didn't have the login for our main brokerage account. I started searching through his desk drawers for a password list, but then I noticed the pantry door was open. I walked into the kitchen and saw one of the plastic snack bins had cracked. A bag of pretzels had spilled everywhere, and there were already ants. I spent 10 minutes scrubbing the floor, just arguing with myself about why we keep buying the generic brand when they taste like cardboard. I mean, who even likes those? I was actually getting angry at the pretzels. I stood there for a minute, staring at the tile, wondering why I'm the only person in this house who notices when things are breaking. Once the floor was clean and the pretzels were gone, I went back to the computer. I was still angry, it just had a different target now. I found the password in a notebook in the back of his desk. When I logged in, I just stopped. Our retirement fund, the one Wed built for 20 years, was missing nearly $200,000. He hadn't just bought a cottage. He'd been paying for a whole second life with our safety net. I sat back and looked around the room, the high ceilings, the expensive desk, the degrees on the wall. Everything in this house was meant to look successful. I guess I realized then that the unstable talk wasn't just about the affair. It was to keep me from asking questions about the money. If I believed I was losing my grip, I'd just rely on him to tell me what the truth was. I didn't feel like crying anymore, I just felt this. I don't know this drive. I opened a new folder on the computer and started saving everything. Bank statements, mortgage apps, transfers. I took photos of the leather bag and the recorder. I just made a digital trail of every single lie. Sometime in mid-October, I thought about calling a lawyer. But I didn't do it right away. I wanted to see how far he'd go. I wanted to see his face when he realized the unstable wife had actually been paying attention. That evening, when David came home, I was in the living room with a glass of white wine. I smiled at him. "How was your day, honey?" I asked. "Stressful," he said, dropping his keys. "The merger is a nightmare. I'm exhausted." "I bet," I said, taking a sip of wine. "You must be so tired from managing all those corporate retreats." David froze. He looked at me, eyes narrowing, trying to figure out if I was joking or if I'd found something else. I didn't say anything. I just kept smiling and watched him. David didn't say anything for a while. After I mentioned the corporate retreats, he stood there with his briefcase, giving me this look. I couldn't tell if he was confused or just annoyed. He didn't apologize or even lie about it. He let it get awkward, like he was waiting for me to forget why I was even talking. "Emma, seriously?" "Not tonight," he finally said. He wasn't even looking at me, he was looking past me toward the kitchen. "If you're feeling insecure, we can talk this weekend, but I'm dead. I've been dealing with a $30 million merger for 10 hours. I need a shower and a drink." He walked past me, and I could smell that woody cologne I got him for his birthday. I watched him leave. For 25 years, that exhausted sigh has been his thing. It's basically a signal that if I keep asking questions, I'm the one being aggressive. It was a wall he put up whenever I got too close to something. I didn't follow him. I didn't scream or break anything. I stood in the living room, looking at the beige walls and the art from that gallery in Deep Ellum. I actually hated that gallery, but he loved it. We had a vision for the house, that's what the designer called it. Looking at it then, it just felt fake. The next few weeks were strange. During the day, I was still the same Emma. I went to my listing appointments, dealt with the HOA complaining about someone's mailbox being the wrong shade of charcoal, and kept the house clean. I still made his coffee, I still asked how his day was. I didn't believe a word coming out of his mouth. When he left for the office, that's when I actually started working. I spent hours in the home office, sitting in that ergonomic chair he picked out digging through his digital life. I wasn't even looking for money anymore. I wanted to know who M was. I found her in some deleted emails archived in a cloud drive he thought I didn't know about. Her name was Maya. She was 32, a landscape architect who'd worked on one of the firm's projects a few years back. She wasn't some random fling, it was a whole other life. The emails weren't just romantic, they were domestic. They talked about the garden, the light on the porch in the morning, and peace away from the city. David talked to her in a way I hadn't heard in a decade. He told her he could finally breathe. He said his life in Dallas was just a performance for his status, reading that didn't feel like a sharp pain. It was more like a dull ache. I thought about the 25 years I'd spent keeping that performance going for him. I managed the social calendar, the kids' extracurriculars, the thank you notes. I did everything to make sure things ran smoothly so he could be the star. And all the while, he was using the money we'd saved for our future to build a place where I didn't exist. I was so on edge that I almost had a meltdown at Target one afternoon because they were out of the clear acrylic bins I wanted for the pantry. I spent 10 minutes wandering the aisle, getting frustrated that a store that big couldn't keep basic items in stock. I realized I was holding a bin I didn't even want and felt ridiculous, but that frustration was the only thing that felt real at the time. Once I got home, I went back to the computer. I found the address of the cottage in a small town called Glen Rose. It wasn't a mansion, just a modest place with a blue door. I didn't tell David I was going. I waited until a Thursday, a day he had a late night at the office. I told him I was visiting my sister in Fort Worth for a few days to clear my head. I played into the unstable thing he'd been claiming about me. He actually looked relieved. He kissed my forehead and told me it was a great idea for my mental health. The drive to Glen Rose took almost 3 hours. As I left Dallas and the road started winding, I felt detached, like I was driving out of my own life. When I saw the blue door, I stopped the car about a block away and sat there. It looked exactly like the photos, but seeing it in person made it feel permanent. There were peonies in the garden, the ones Maya mentioned. I got out and walked up to the porch. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. I looked at the porch swing and the two rocking chairs side by side. There was a small table between them with a ceramic coaster and a half-empty bag of coffee beans. I realized then that it wasn't just an affair. He had a different version of himself there that he liked better. In Dallas, he was the senior partner, the husband, the guy with the 401k and the HOA fines. Here, he was just a guy who liked gardening, and he used the life I built for him to pay for the escape. I stood there for a while. I didn't feel like screaming. I felt clear. I looked at that blue door and realized I didn't want to be part of that peace. I didn't want to fight for a man who saw his marriage as a chore. The drive back to Dallas was miserable. Some accident near Arlington had the highway backed up for miles. I spent an hour crawling forward at 5 miles per hour staring at brake lights. I didn't even care. When I walked into the house that evening, David was already home. He was in the kitchen pouring a glass of scotch. He looked up and smiled, a genuine-looking smile that would-be fooled anyone. "How is your sister?" he asked. "Do you feel more relaxed?" "I do," I said, leaning against the counter. "I feel like I finally understand everything." He paused, bottle still in his hand. He searched my face, trying to see if I was about to break down or accuse him of something. He was waiting for the unstable version of me to come back. "That's good, honey," he said in that smooth, patronizing tone he always uses. "I'm glad you're feeling better." I smiled back. I didn't tell him about Glen Rose. I didn't tell him about Maya, or that I had every bank transfer and email saved in 3 different clouds. For the next few days, I acted like the perfect wife. I did the grocery shopping, coordinated the kids' holiday visits, and even suggested that steakhouse in Plano he likes. I watched him, he was so confident. He really believed he'd outsmarted method. I was just a predictable part of his life, like the vac system or the lawn service. One night I was looking for old tax papers in the den and found some receipts from a trip we took to Mexico 15 years ago. I spent a few minutes flipping through them, remembering how we'd argued about which beach to go to. It was a random memory, But it hit me that I couldn't even remember what we'd eaten for dinner. That trip, the details were just gone. I wondered how much of my own history I'd pushed aside just to make room for his. I put the receipts back and closed the drawer. I started making moves in secret. I found a lawyer, not someone from the firm, but a woman who specialized in high-asset divorces. I spent 2 hours in her office downtown, handing over the folders. He's been very thorough, the lawyer told me, looking at the bank statements. But he made the classic mistake. He thought you weren't paying attention. I guess I'm the only one who actually was. I told her, leaving her office. I felt a weird sensation in my chest. Not happiness exactly, just a weight lift off. The weight was still there, but it wasn't crushing me anymore. When I got home, David was in the living room reading a brief. He didn't look up. "Did you get the dry cleaning?" he asked. "I did," I said. "I went upstairs and packed a small bag. Just in case." I didn't know exactly when I'd give him the papers, but I wanted the timing to be right. I wanted him to feel completely secure in his world before I pulled the rug. I lay in bed that night, listening to him breathe. For years, that sound had been comforting. Now it just sounded like a clock. I thought about the blue door in Glen Rose. I wondered if Maya knew her place was built on stolen retirement funds and 25 years of lies. I wondered if she'd still like those peonies once she knew whose life had been torn apart to plant them. I fell asleep. I didn't dream about the past. I thought about the look on his face when he'd finally realize what was happening. The next morning was humid. I woke up at 6 and started the coffee. Black, strong, in the heavy mug he likes. I put it on the counter exactly where he expects it. Then I sat at the table and waited for him to come down, wondering if he'd notice I wasn't wearing my ring. He didn't. He walked into the kitchen, kissed my cheek, and took a sip of his coffee. "Big day today," he said. "I might be late again." "That's fine," I said, smiling. "I have some errands to run." I watched him drive away in his silver Lexus. I stood there for a long time after the engine faded, staring at the empty coffee pot. I didn't feel sad or lonely. I felt ready, so for the next 2 weeks, I basically just went on autopilot. I found out I was actually pretty good at the whole happy, quiet wife thing. I'd been doing it for 25 years, so it was just easy. I didn't even have to think about it. I kept the house spotless. I made sure the fridge had that specific sparkling water David is obsessed with. When he complained about his coworkers, I just nodded and looked concerned. It felt weird, honestly. Like I was watching a movie of my own life and just taking notes. I wasn't really Emma the wife anymore. I was more like an investigator. My lawyer, Sarah, was intense. She had this short silver haircut and a way of looking at you that made you feel like she already knew all your secrets. Her office was in one of those boring buildings in downtown Dallas, right next to a bunch of accountants. It smelled like old paper and way too much coffee. During our second meeting, she explained that since we're in Texas, he can't just hide money in a separate account and call it his. She called it dissipation of marital assets, which is basically a fancy way of saying that if he spent our money on another woman and a house, the court could just credit that back to me in the end. I looked at the folders on her desk, bank statements, emails, the mortgage for that place in Glen Rose. It all looked so clinical. It wasn't a feeling in my chest anymore. It was just a pile of exhibits. I told her I wanted everything. My voice sounded flat, even to me. I didn't feel greedy. I just felt like I was taking back stuff he'd stolen. Sarah told me we'd get as much as the law allows, but we had to be smart, she said. If he suspected I was planning this, he might try to hide more money or move it offshore. So she told me to keep doing exactly what I was doing, be the perfect wife, be unstable, if that's what he believed, because it kept him from worrying. When I left her office, the traffic on the North Dallas Tollway was just awful. Just a bunch of white SUVs barely moving in the heat. I rolled down my window and let the hot air hit my face. It felt more honest than anything else going on in my life. When I got home, the neighborhood was way too quiet. Every lawn was the same height, every mailbox perfectly lined up. Honestly, I think the hoe would have fined me if I had one weed in the garden. I just sat in my car for a minute, staring at the garage door. I wondered if the other women on the block, people I've had coffee with for years, were also just playing a role. I wondered if they had folders of evidence hidden in their closets too. That evening, David was in a great mood. He'd probably closed a deal or something. Let's go to that French place in Highland Park, he said, fixing his tie, the one with the tasting menu. I think we deserve a night out. I smiled and went to get ready. While I was doing my makeup, I noticed I just looked tired. There were lines around my eyes that weren't there a year ago. I realized I'd spent so much time on his needs and the kids' schedules that I'd kind of forgotten how to take care of myself. I put on some bold red lipstick kind he usually hates because he prefers the natural look, and it felt like a tiny win at dinner. David mostly talked about himself. The firm, the boardroom, his 5-year plan. I was basically just a supportive audience. He reached over and squeezed my hand, and he had this look of confidence that just seemed delusional now. You've been way more chill lately, Em, he said in that sweet, patronizing voice he uses. I can tell those breathing exercises are actually working. I'm proud of you. I felt a bit sick. He was basically patting me on the head for finally shutting up and doing what he wants. I didn't pull my hand away, though. I just smiled and thanked him. He looked happy. He really believed he'd fixed me. He believed the story he'd made up, that I was the fragile one and he was the strong one. The following Tuesday, I needed to find our original marriage certificate and some old tax records for Sarah. I went into the den and started digging through these plastic bins in the closet. I found a box of old electronics cables for phones we don't even own anymore, a digital camera from 2008, just a huge mess of white cords. I spent like 15 minutes trying to untangle one specific USB cable and I just snapped. I was literally whispering curses at the cables, wondering why he kept this junk. He has this habit of hoarding useful things that are obsolete the second he buys something new. I ended up just shoving the whole mess back in the box with a loud thud. I can't believe I got that mad over a piece of plastic. Anyway, once I calmed down, I found the folder. The marriage license was there from 25 years ago. I looked at the signatures. His was bold and confident. Mine was smaller, a bit shaky. I wondered if I'd been hesitant back then too. Or if I just spent 25 years shrinking myself to fit into the space he gave me. I spent the rest of the afternoon with a forensic accountant Sarah recommended. We were tracing the consulting fees David had been paying to that account in Glen Rose. Turns out he wasn't just paying for a house, he was funding a whole lifestyle for Maya. A version of our life but without the annoying parts. No PT meetings, no HOA, no stressful holidays. He was giving her the romantic version of himself. The accountant also found that David had been skimming from the kids' trust funds. Small amounts, things he thought wouldn't be noticed. That was the part that actually made me cold. I could handle the affair, and I could handle him stealing my retirement. But the kids? I just sat there looking at the screen. The numbers didn't lie. By mid-November, I started making a list, not of things I wanted, but things I needed to secure. I changed my passwords. I opened a separate bank account in my name and moved some small amounts of money from the joint account. I put my passport, my birth certificate, and Sarah's folders into a safe deposit box at a bank David didn't use. Every time I did something, I felt this weird mix of fear and, I don't know, excitement. It was the first time in my adult life that I had a secret that was actually mine. For years, David was the one with the hidden lives and the secret accounts. Now it was my turn. The tension in the house was there, but it was invisible, or maybe it was just me. David seemed totally oblivious. He still treated me like part of the furniture. He'd ask where his blue tie was, or tell me to schedule the gutter cleaning, assuming I was just there, compliant and quiet. One night, I was making dinner roast chicken and vegetables, something boring. And David came up behind me and wrapped his arms around me. I'm thinking about taking a trip in December, he whispered. Just a few days, a corporate retreat in the valley. I think I need to clear my head. The valley gland rose. I didn't freeze up, I didn't scream. I just kept stirring the carrots. That sounds lovely, David, I said. You've been working so hard, you deserve a break. He kissed my shoulder and let go. You're an angel, Emma. I watched him walk out of the room and realized I didn't really hate him. Hate takes too much energy. I was just done. Like realizing the guy I've spent 25 years with is actually just a total stranger. Or a joke. I spent the next few days finishing the plan with Sarah. We weren't going to file for divorce right away. We were going to wait until he left for his retreat in December. That way, he'd be gone, and we could move fast to freeze assets and serve him the papers while he was away. Sarah told me the element of surprise was my biggest asset. She said he thinks Hez the predator here, and to just let him keep thinking that until the end. I thought about the kids. They're older now, and they've always looked up to him. He was the successful one. I wondered how they'd feel, knowing their dad stole from their trusts to buy a cottage for another woman. I felt a little guilty about the mess that was coming, but then I remembered how he talked to me when he thought no one was listening. I remembered the unstable comments. I realized that protecting the kids from the truth was basically just protecting David, and I was done with that. As December got closer, the weather in Dallas got weird. One day it was 60 degrees, the next it was freezing. The neighborhood looked like a postcard, with those huge, inflatable Santas on every lawn and white lights everywhere. I'd spent a lot of time in the garden, even though it was cold. The soil was too hard to plant anything, but I liked the wind on my face and the silence. I thought about Maya and her peonies. I wondered if she knew her peaceful escape was paid for by a thief. I didn't want to be her enemy, though. I didn't even want to know her. She was just another part of the puzzle. A few days before his trip, David came home late. He smelled like scotch and cigars, and he was humming some tune, looking really relaxed. "I've got everything sorted for the trip," he said, tossing his keys on the counter. Thursday to Sunday. I told the office I'll check emails sometimes, but mostly I'm just unplugging. "I'm sure that'll be refreshing," I said, leaning against the counter. He looked at me, and for a second, I thought he might actually see it. He narrowed his eyes a bit. I didn't blink. I just gave him a small, pleasant smile like a flight attendant before the plane takes off. "Are you okay, Emma? You seem quiet." "I'm just tired, honey," I said. "It's been a long week. We'll get some rest," he said, patting my cheek. "I want you to be in a good place before I leave." I watched him go upstairs and felt this strange sense of calm. The documents were signed. The accounts were separate. Everything was set. That night, I lay in bed and just listened to the house, the hum of the AC, a dog barking a few streets over. For 25 years, this house was my whole world. ID picked every piece of art, managed every detail. I thought this house was my legacy. Now it just felt like a very expensive cage. I thought about that blue door in Glane Rose. I realized I didn't want a cottage or a secret garden. I just wanted my own name back. I wanted to be something other than David Jackson's wife. The next morning, I made the coffee, black, strong in the heavy mug he likes. I put it exactly where he expects it. I wasn't wearing my ring. I didn't think he'd notice, but I liked the feeling of my bare finger against the porcelain. David came down, kissed my cheek, and drank his coffee in silence. He was already mentally in the valley, thinking about the peonies. He didn't notice that the woman in his kitchen wasn't the person he'd married. I spent the day doing boring stuff. I went to the grocery store, coordinated the kids' holiday visits over the phone, and spent an hour polishing the silver. I usually hate doing that, but it felt therapeutic, like I was cleaning away the last bits of a life I didn't want. As the sun went down, I looked at the calendar. Thursday was only 2 days away. I had this sudden urge to just tell him everything right then, to scream about the money, the house, the lawyer. But I stopped myself. I remembered what Sarah said about surprise. I remembered the look of pity on his face from that first night in the closet. I didn't want his pity. I didn't want a big fight in the kitchen. I wanted a clean break. I wanted him to feel the exact moment the floor disappeared. I went to the kitchen to start dinner. Just some pasta with garlic sauce. While the water was boiling, I noticed the dishwasher was making a rattling noise. I opened it and found a plastic lid had fallen and was jamming the spray arm. I spent a few minutes repositioning the dishes, fitting everything back where it belonged. When I closed the door and started it, the rattling stopped. It just had a steady, rhythmic hum. I stood there for a second, listening to the dishwasher, and I knew I was ready.